Burgundy and Gold Nation, brace yourselves, because the Washington Commanders just got hit with news that has fans clutching their popcorn and screaming at their screens. In the span of a few short weeks, this team has watched not one, but two of its trench players go down with season-altering injuries, and now the front office is scrambling to figure out how to patch a defensive line that suddenly looks paper-thin heading into a brutal opening schedule. But that's not all. There's drama on the practice field, a rookie center quietly stealing the spotlight, a Pro Bowl cornerback racing the clock to get healthy, and, because the football gods love irony, an ice bucket challenge gone slightly sideways. Oh, and did we mention a literal family reunion is brewing for Week 3 that has an entire fan base counting down the days? Grab a seat, because we are diving headfirst into everything happening in Ashburn right now, and trust us, you do not want to miss a single second of this. Let's rewind to how this all started. Just hours after the Commander Report team wrapped their video for the day, the news broke like a thunderclap over training camp. Third-year defensive tackle Johnny Newton, the former second-round pick out of Illinois, is going to be sidelined indefinitely. The diagnosis? A torn pectoral muscle, which for anyone who isn't a sports medicine expert, is about as painful and disruptive an injury as a defensive lineman can suffer. Newton underwent surgery almost immediately, reportedly up in New York where he had been seeing a specialist. Commanders fans had been holding their breath, hoping the trip to New York was just a precaution, hoping the news would come back clean. It didn't. Instead, they got the gut punch, 4 to 6 months of recovery time, which, if you're doing the math at home, basically wipes out Newton's entire regular season. Sure, recovery timelines vary from player to player, and there's a theoretical chance he could return in time for a possible playoff run, but let's be real. The front office has to plan as if Johnny Newton is done, finished, out of the equation for 2026. And that is a massive blow. Because Newton wasn't just a rotational body, he was supposed to be this defense's designated interior pass rusher, a quick, shifty disruptor who could get after the quarterback from the inside in a way very few other players on this roster can replicate. And here's the part that really stings. Newton isn't even the first big trench injury this team has absorbed this summer. A couple weeks before this news broke, standout lineman Laramie Tunsil suffered a torn triceps muscle. Another injury with the exact same "we're not counting on him this year" energy hanging over it. So just take a second to process that. Two key players in the trenches, both effectively done for the regular season, both injuries carrying that agonizing maybe, just maybe, if everything breaks right and the team makes a deep playoff run caveat that gives fans false hope more than actual optimism. It is, in a word, brutal. Now here's where things get interesting. Because the Commanders are handling these two losses in completely different ways. For Tunsil, the front office has made it clear, no outside help is coming, at least not right now. Instead, they are turning to Brandon Coleman, a third-year offensive tackle out of TCU who, fun fact, was drafted in that very same class as Johnny Newton. And by all early accounts, Coleman has actually looked solid in his limited preseason snaps so far, giving fans a small silver lining amid the chaos. Alongside him, the team is sliding Chris Paul into the starting left guard spot, the very same role he held for a majority of games last season. And suddenly, that modest 1-year, $3 million contract the Commanders handed Chris Paul in the offseason is looking like an absolute stroke of genius. Because right now, that depth is exactly what's keeping this offensive line from completely unraveling. But the defensive tackle situation is a different animal entirely, and that's because this position group wasn't exactly overflowing with depth to begin with. Losing Johnny Newton doesn't just remove a body from the rotation, it removes a specific, specialized skill set that nobody else on the roster quite replicates. Newton was never going to be confused for a dominant run stuffer. In fact, if we're being brutally honest, he's undersized for the position and tends to get pushed backward against the run, something that was on full display during last week's preseason opener. But what Newton could do, and do well, was rush the passer from the interior in specific situational packages, using his quickness and shiftiness to create chaos in opposing backfields. Those types of designated interior pass rushers are genuinely valuable commodities in today's NFL, and now the Commanders are heading into the season without one. So who's left to pick up the slack? Right now, the interior rotation includes names like Doug Payne, Tim Settle, who is expected back on the field very soon, and former first-round pick Jer'Jon Johnny Kinlaw. Beyond that trio, though, things thin out fast. You've got Ricky Barber, Shy Tuttle, and a handful of other depth pieces who could see expanded roles, but none of them profile as the kind of dynamic interior disruptor that Newton was supposed to be. That leaves the front office staring at two options: dip into free agency or explore a trade. And according to insiders close to the situation, free agency is the far more likely path forward, mainly because there are still some intriguing veteran names sitting unsigned on the open market. So let's talk options, because this is where things get spicy. First up is Daquan Jones, a long-tenured veteran most recently with the Buffalo Bills. Yes, Father Time is undefeated, and Jones is starting to show a few signs of age, but he remains an unrestricted free agent with a mountain of experience. Exactly the kind of steady, rotational fourth option a desperate interior line could use right now. Then there's Larry Ogunjobi, a true NFL journeyman who has bounced between multiple teams throughout his career, most recently suiting up for Buffalo last season. He remains unsigned as of this moment, sitting there on the free agent board just waiting for a call. And finally, and this one might tug at the heartstrings of longtime fans, there's Sheldon Day, a name Commanders faithful will absolutely recognize. Day spent time with this very organization over the past couple of seasons and reportedly turned in some genuinely strong performances while he was here. Even though the scheme in Washington has completely changed, there's a real argument that his existing chemistry with certain teammates could make him an attractive, low-risk reunion. If forced to pick just one name off that list, the smart money seems to be on Daquan Jones, purely because he's been the most consistently productive of the bunch in recent seasons. But don't sleep on the idea that this team might simply trust internal development, leaning more heavily on Payne, Kinlaw, and Settle to soak up the extra workload with a breakout candidate like Brian Cart, who reportedly turned heads with a strong preseason debut against Miami last week, potentially forcing his way into a bigger role. All right, let's shift gears, because while the defensive line drama has dominated headlines, there's a whole lot more brewing out on the practice fields of Ashburn. And the biggest storyline heading into Saturday's second preseason matchup against the Detroit Lions revolves around one very important question. Is franchise quarterback Jayden Daniels going to suit up and play? As of the latest reports, the answer is trending toward yes. Head coach Dan Quinn has indicated that a final decision would be made closer to game time, and that Daniels' status is closely tied to how the rest of the roster's injury situation shakes out. Essentially, the coaching staff is weighing whether it's worth the risk of putting their franchise quarterback on the field, given everything else this team is dealing with right now. But here's the telling detail. Sources on the ground at Commanders training camp noted that Daniels' practice reps and schedule looked distinctly like a player gearing up to actually play in a game, not like a player being held back. Now, to be crystal clear, this isn't an official confirmation. Nothing is locked in stone. But all signs are pointing toward Jayden Daniels getting at least a drive or two of runtime against Detroit. And honestly, that's exciting. Fans are going to get their first real look at Daniels operating in this brand new offensive scheme, even if it's a stripped-down vanilla version designed to keep the good stuff hidden from opposing coordinators. Don't expect flashy trick plays or the full offensive playbook on display, but simply watching Daniels line up under center and execute the fundamentals of this new system will be must-see television for Commanders fans starved for meaningful reps from their franchise cornerstone. And as long as he's only logging a limited number of snaps, the injury risk should be relatively contained. But quarterback intrigue isn't the only injury conversation swirling around Ashburn right now. Dan Quinn's daily press conference dropped a few more Nuggets fans need to know. First up, presumptive starting center Nick Allegretti, who has been on quite the frustrating journey through this entire training camp. Allegretti, who is transitioning to a brand new position after primarily playing guard, has missed nearly every single practice so far, and now there's a fresh wrinkle. He reportedly experienced calf tightness during yesterday's session. The good news? Imaging came back completely clean, no structural damage detected. The more frustrating news? Out of an abundance of caution, he's going to be held out for the remainder of the week's practices and will also sit out Saturday's preseason game. The silver lining here is that he's expected to be back on the field early next week, well ahead of the final preseason tune-up against the Baltimore Ravens. Then there's running back Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt's teammate. Well, actually, let's focus on Rachaad White, who is notably absent from practice and was announced last night to be dealing with a hamstring injury. The good news is that it's reportedly minor, and White was actually back at practice today, though operating in a very limited capacity. Now here's where things get delightfully absurd. There was some early speculation floating around that White might have tweaked something during the running back room's now infamous All's Ice Bucket Challenge a few days back. Picture this. White gets doused in freezing water, he's wearing slides of all things, and he slips right there on the spot. Naturally, fans connected the dots and assumed that's how the hamstring injury happened. Turns out, according to the team, that's apparently not the actual cause. Coincidence? Maybe? Hilarious regardless? Absolutely. Now let's talk about the situation that's genuinely starting to cause some low-level panic among the coaching staff and fan base alike: cornerback Trey Amos. This one's a bit more concerning than the others. Amos essentially missed the entirety of OTAs and nearly all of training camp, save for a handful of minutes during individual and team drills. And in a cruel twist of fate, the very day he finally returned to practice was the exact day he suffered the ankle injury that's currently sidelining him. According to Coach Quinn, Amos will not practice for the remainder of this week and will sit out Saturday's game against Detroit, though he is reportedly making progress toward a return. Here's why this one stings a little more than the others, though. This is a brand new defensive scheme with brand new pieces in the secondary, meaning chemistry and continuity matter enormously right now. And Amos is missing crucial reps to build that cohesion. And let's not forget, Amos is coming off a fractured fibula from last season, which means he's already fighting an uphill battle to shake off rust while simultaneously learning a new system. To make matters even more nerve-wracking, this team is staring down one of the toughest opening schedules in the league, with Amos likely being tasked with shadowing elite receivers like Devonta Smith right out of the gate in Week 1. Anyone remember what happened last season when a key player missed the bulk of training camp? Terry McLaurin held out for a new contract, came back rusty, and by the time he finally found his rhythm, Jaden Daniels went down with his own injury. Nobody wants to see that pattern repeat itself, and that's exactly why Almos's recovery timeline deserves close monitoring over the coming weeks. That same missing too much time concern applies once again to Nick Allegretti at center. He's essentially been a ghost throughout this entire training camp, and now he's being asked to learn a brand new position on the fly. Meanwhile, rookie Michigan State product Matt Goldsmith has been quietly putting together an outstanding camp, looking sharp not just in practice but also during last week's preseason opener. All eyes should be locked on Goldsmith this week against Detroit, because if he continues performing at this level, there's a very real argument brewing that the Commanders should hand him the starting center job over a veteran who simply hasn't had the reps to prove he's ready. It's the classic hot rookie versus unproven veteran storyline that makes training camp so much fun to follow. And it's shaping up to be one of the more fascinating position battles on this entire roster. Now, let's end things on a much lighter, feel-good note, because amid all this injury chaos, there's a genuinely heartwarming storyline developing that Commanders fans are going to want to circle on their calendars. Trayvon Diggs, yes, the brother of Washington's own superstar wide receiver Stephon Diggs, just signed with the Seattle Seahawks. And wouldn't you know it, the reigning Super Bowl champion Seahawks just so happened to be on Washington's home schedule in Week 3. That means Trayvon and Stephon Diggs, two brothers who grew up right there in the DMV, are set for an emotional homecoming and reunion on the very field where their football journeys first began. Picture it, Stephon Diggs wearing the home burgundy jersey for potentially the first time in that specific matchup, going head-to-head against his own brother in front of a hometown crowd. If the football gods have any sense of drama at all, these two will find themselves lined up directly across from each other at some point in that game, creating an absolutely electric brother versus brother moment that fans will be talking about for years. It's the kind of storyline that transcends wins and losses, a genuine feel-good moment sitting right in the middle of an otherwise stressful and injury-riddled training camp. So there you have it, Commanders fans, a training camp full of highs, lows, question marks, and everything in between. Johnny Newton is likely done for the year. Laramie Tunsil is being replaced from within. The defensive tackle room needs reinforcements, and names like Daquan Jones, Larry Ogunjobi, and Sheldon Day are all floating around as potential fixes. Jaden Daniels looks primed to make his preseason debut in this new offense. Nick Allegretti and Trey Amos are both racing the clock to get healthy before the regular season kicks off. A rookie center is quietly forcing his way into the conversation. And in 3 short weeks, we get to watch a genuine family reunion play out on Washington's home turf. This is why training camp football, even with all its bumps and bruises, is must-follow content every single day. There is simply too much happening. Too many storylines developing in real time for any true Commanders fan to afford missing an update. So if you want to stay locked in on every single twist and turn as this roster takes shape heading into the regular season, do not go anywhere. Smash that like button so this channel keeps reaching more Commanders fans just like you. Drop a comment down below and let us know who you think the Commanders should target at defensive tackle and whether you think Matt Goldsmith deserves to start over Nick Allegretti at center. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because we are bringing you fresh Commanders coverage every single day, all the way through the preseason and deep into the regular season. Until next time, Commanders fans, hail to the burgundy and gold.